Good afternoon, folks. My name is Zoya Sheftalovich. I'm Politico's Chief EU correspondent and the host of the Brussels Playbook podcast. Hopefully you've all subscribed. If you haven't, please do. Rate us, review us, as I say at the end of every episode. What we've got today for you is a bit of an experiment. We are trying to do a podcast episode session live. And who better to do it with than Commissioner Jørgensen? So I'm going to do things a little bit differently. I'm going to introduce it as if it's a podcast. So bear with me. It's our first time doing it. Let's give it a try.
Let's go.
Folks, without further ado, let's dive in. G'day.
G'day.
The vibe in Brussels today, well, it's chilly because all of us are turning off our heating and not filling up our cars because we're worried about rising energy prices. So I'm really pleased that we have the EU's Commissioner Dan Jørgensen with us today, who is very much in this arena. Commissioner Jørgensen, you are the Commissioner for Energy and Housing. I don't think there is a people at the moment. How are you doing?
Well, when you put it like that. No, seriously, obviously we live in turbulent times. Energy is at the center of many of the challenges that we face. We are in a process of getting rid of our dependency of Russian gas. So there's the security dimension. There's the price dimension because prices are high. They were even before the present crisis in the Middle East. This hurts our competitiveness. It hurts our citizens because of the high costs of living. There's decarbonization still, of course, as a main focus point in our energy system because we need to fight climate change. At the same time, housing is considered one of the biggest challenges in many, many member states because it's simply too expensive to find decent, livable housing. Some places it's impossible.
Yeah, I just undertook a bit of a search in Brussels and it was a challenge and I think I'm luckier than most. It's certainly hard around most capital cities, it feels like, and especially if you're looking at places like Lisbon where housing prices are above average household income. So what can be done? I mean, people around the bloc are feeling this cost of living crisis and we've got perma-crises now. It feels a bit like 2022 when the war first broke out in Ukraine. We were all kind of suddenly struck with this energy emergency. Yeah. But it's years down the track, 4 years down the track, and we're feeling the same sorts of pressures. What can the Commission do?
Well, in a way, it's similar. It's similar because people are struggling to pay their bills. But if we dive into an analysis of what is actually happening, it's quite different. One of the reasons it's different is that we are better situated now to dealing with the crisis. In 22, we were heavily dependent on gas from Russia. We got 45% of our gas in Europe from Russia. We got almost 50% of our coal from Russia, and we got 27% of our oil from Russia. Today, that dependency is of course of a different nature. We get zero coal, we get almost no oil, and we get around 10% of our gas from Russia, and we're getting out of that dependency also. We have also deployed much more renewables. This means that we have more homegrown energy and we have more cheap energy. This means also that the coupling between gas prices and electricity prices is not as big a problem as it was in 22. It's still a challenge, but not as big as it was. So in many ways, we've moved forward. Now, the reason why this hurts us so hard as it does, the present situation, is that when the world market prices goes up, it doesn't really matter so much what your sources are. If you are dependent on fossils, you will be hurt. That's also why, of course, our overall strategy to become independent and to, in the future, use our homegrown renewable energy instead of importing fossils is the right strategy.
But, you know, there is obviously this backlash now as well, and we saw it at the previous European Council summit, that there was a cadre of countries that came out ahead of that summit and were trying to take pot shots at the EU's ETS. There is kind of horse trading around the green transition. The European People's Party, which is the party of Ursula von der Leyen, the Commission President, they are trying to roll back some of that green transition and the Green Deal. So does it feel like just at the time when Europe is kind of dabbling and trying to go towards that green transition, we've also got these forces dragging back, and who's winning?
Well, it is clear that there can be potentially a trade-off between what is necessary to do short-term, targeted, temporary, to help some types of industry that might be extra hard hit by the crisis that we're in, or vulnerable groups in our societies. So for instance, during the last crisis in 22, I was Minister of Energy and Climate in Denmark, and we were moving fast on our green agenda. But because of the crisis, we had to pay subsidies to some of our citizens to help pay their gas bills. So on one hand, we were subsidizing green energy and making a lot of legislation and plans and implementing things that would move us fast into a decarbonized economy. With the other hand, we were subsidizing gas, something that of course is counterintuitive and something that you can only do short term in order to mediate a situation that is very, very serious. We need to be able to, on a European level, find the balance between helping short term without us hurting our ability to stay on course with the green transition in the long run. Because I call it a green transition, but I could also call it a transition towards more affordable energy, a transition towards more energy independence. And this is why I'm actually optimistic at the end of the day, because even though I do acknowledge that the discussions you referred to are, of course, obviously there, I will still say, bottom line, that there's no real debate in Europe on whether or not we need more renewables and we need to move away from this dependency, because it's so clear for everybody that we do. It's simply not sustainable to import for more than 370 billion euros of fossils every year. It's much better for everybody if instead we invest in our own homegrown energy.
It's interesting, you mentioned the kind of impact that price rises have, because this is an issue. It doesn't matter what you're using to power your homes. If the prices go up, if you're relying on fossil fuels, your price is going to go up. I mean, that kind of brings into the room the elephant in the room, which is this Iran war. And of course, the EU is not really doing much and can't do all that much to stop that. We've spoken about de-escalation. We know that's the EU strategy. Maybe there's some talk of a Speeders mission, which is the EU's kind of ships that can go and help out. But ultimately, that is a thing that we're talking about after the crisis de-escalates. We don't know when that's going to happen. The Strait of Hormuz is closed. We know that 20% of the world's supplies of oil go through that strait normally. I mean, it's a huge impact, not just on Europe's energy prices, on the world's energy prices. And that is a challenge that Europe doesn't appear to have an answer to. I mean, what is being done? What can Europe do when you've got such vast geopolitical problems on the agenda and that are really kind of hoiking the rug out from under Europe's feet when we're trying to bring prices down?
Yeah, so the European councils, the European leader met last week, and one of their very clear conclusions was that we need, as European Commission, to implement a toolbox of different measures that can be used, because it is true that there's no one simple answer, there's no silver bullet, but there's a range of different things that you can do that will help member states and will help citizens and companies. Let me give you a few examples. We do have quite flexible state aid rules that makes it possible for member states to say, okay, this group of vulnerable citizens, we will help them economically to face this crisis, or these types of industry, we will help them lower their energy bills. So you can do that with state aid, and we'll make those possibilities even better. Also, we will help construct different financial instruments that will stabilize prices. So this is a bit technical, but PPAs and CFDs and different types of instrument.
Those are some fancy
well, yeah, so, okay.
there.
No, but what it means is basically today there's a connection between the price of electricity and the price of gas. And we need to decouple that. How do we do that? Well, that's by applying some of these measures, and we will help member states do it. And then there's taxation. I mean, it really isn't very rational that some member states, they tax electricity much harder than they tax gas. Because what we want is for our economy to build more on cheap green electricity than expensive gas.
And which member states are those?
Well, I can mention one that is not doing it, because then instead of pointing fingers, I'm showing a good example. My own country, Denmark, have chosen recently to lower taxes significantly on electricity. This means that the right incentives for the right decisions of investment are there, and it can give immediate release for some of the industries under pressure. And we have put forward these recommendations from the side of the Commission, that we really urge member states to lower tax on electricity. Then we have, of course, the more long-term solutions that we can speed up. We need faster permitting of new renewables. We need more investments in storage and so forth. So there's so many things that if you add them all up and you do them fast, then it will indeed have a meaningful impact also on the short term.
The other element here, though, is that there is a taboo topic that seems to be potentially coming back onto the stage. So we saw at that European Council summit, per my reporting, that there was one leader, Bart de Wever, who asked within that European Council summit whether it was time to start discussing imports and getting rid of that Russian oil phase out and come back to that Russian oil. Is it time to start that discussion now? He didn't say necessarily that he wanted to do that, but he asked the group, is it time to have that discussion? We also know that there is this dispute over the Druzhba pipeline, which is that pipeline that carries Russian oil through Ukraine to Hungary and Slovakia, and Viktor Orban, the Hungarian Prime Minister, has made hay out of that pipeline. There's a huge dispute, and he's linking that to the 90 billion euro loan that Ukraine desperately needs this year. And he's saying until oil is flowing through there again, he's not doing business. It seems to me like this crisis has really helped one man and one man only, and that man is Vladimir Putin, the Russian president. Is that, is there now this pragmatic kind of tide turning back towards dependency on Russian gas, or at least being open to Russian gas and oil and so forth?
So now I'm going to do something that I, as a former podcast host myself, know that you will like. I will be very direct and maybe not so diplomatic.
That's my favorite type of podcast guest.
No, there is no road back to dependency of Russian energy. In my opinion, in the future, we should not again ever import as much as one molecule of Russian energy. Listen, Russia is conducting a terrible, brutal war, killing people on our continent. That war for too long has indirectly been financed by money that they've gotten in Russia from us buying their energy. Apart from that, Russia has blackmailed member states with energy of the European Union. They have weaponized energy against us. So again, back to 22, when I served as Minister of Energy and Climate in Denmark at that time, I can tell you that we spent days and nights, the first couple of weeks of the conflict when the full-scale invasion happened, preparing for what we would do in Denmark if indeed Putin chose to close the taps on us in Europe. He could have done, he didn't, but he could have done. Had he done that, we would have had to close down production facilities, factories, companies by force. Imagine that, a country like Denmark, we would have had to send men and women in uniform to close down factories and send home thousands of people because we need to safeguard the gas for other purposes. And Denmark were not even half as exposed as many other European countries. So, bottom line, we were so vulnerable, and we never want to be in such a vulnerable situation again. Now, this also means that the legislation that we made just before Christmas, that is now being transposed and implemented, stands. And it stands also after a peace agreement. When, hopefully, there's a peace agreement in Ukraine, the war is over, not even then will we reconsider buying Russian gas.
That's a strong position. I love it. I want to ask you about your home country, the country you know best, as the Commission is fond of saying.
That's the way we put it usually.
Indeed.
The country I know best.
Your country, fellow countrymen, countrywomen are going to the polls today.
Yes, indeed.
It is a snap election that was called in response to, or after, perhaps not necessarily directly in response to, but after this Greenland crisis, after Donald Trump started saying that he was going to take Greenland by force. How has the impact of those threats affected Danes? What has been, the feeling that you get when you talk to people back home? And what do you think that's going to translate into at the polls today?
I can definitely tell you that I don't think I've met a single Dane that hasn't been truly shocked. We in Denmark consider ourselves historically to be one of the closest friends and allies to the US. We've participated in wars with the US side by side. If you look at the number of soldiers that has lost their lives per capita in US-led wars, Denmark, I think, is the country that has lost the most soldiers. This is a testament to our loyalty to the United States of America. Therefore, obviously, it has been almost an inconceivable blow to all of a sudden have Big Brother, if you want, in normally the good meaning of that phrase, turn against you and even threaten to occupy a part of your kingdom. So, a lot of sadness, to be honest, probably also a lot of anger. I know also a lot of people that were afraid, especially I know a lot of people in Greenland that were terrified. Spoken to a minister who told me how she had to answer questions from her kids like, if the Americans come, will you be killed or will you be put to jail? Discussions that I would have just never imagined would happen.
About the United States, we're not talking about Russia, we're not talking about traditional enemies, we're talking about traditional best friends.
We're talking about who we would normally call to protect us if somebody else said that about us. So, yes, it's clear it affects everybody. But I will also say, it hasn't only affected us in Denmark, it's affected all of Europe. And I've been touched and so proud to be a part of a union that has stood up for Denmark, for Greenland, for our community. European leaders that have said it with such a clear and proud and loud voice as was possible. We stand by Greenland. We stand by international law and rules, and obviously you cannot occupy a territory of a sovereign country. What happens to Greenland in the future needs to be the decision of the Greenlandic people in collaboration with Denmark, obviously. So the support we've been getting from Europe, some people talk about the Greenland moment. I think that might be right, because I think probably the European Union has changed because of this, for the good, I would say, because we stand shoulder by shoulder and we cannot be threatened, and a single member state cannot be threatened.
Might Greenland have changed? Could this be the trigger for it to come and join the European Union, where at least it has some degree of security and safety in numbers?
That's not up to me to say, but I do think I don't think I will offend anybody by also extending to maybe even some of the listeners to this podcast some gratitude. I can definitely do it on my own behalf and on the government of Denmark. I know them, the ministers and the Prime Minister, well enough that I can do that. But I think also this would be true for most Greenlandic people, that they would also agree that we really thank our partners and friends in the European Union for the support we've gotten. And in the polls in Denmark, so We have traditionally, Denmark, been a country where there's been a lot of skepticism towards the EU, and we've had referendums, and some of them, the more pro-European side, have lost, and we've had what I would also call actually good, democratic, healthy disagreements and discussions. But of course, me being very pro-Europe, I would have liked to have more general support for the European Union in the past. Now, this has fundamentally changed. We've never had such a broad support for the European Union as we have now. I think actually I saw even some numbers showing that we were the country in the European Union with the highest degree of support for the European Union.
Talk about the Trump dividend.
Exactly. But you know, maybe it's not that strange that you could wish that it didn't have to come to this, of course. But when you're really under pressure, when you're really threatened, then you really see the value of having good friends and having a very close community. And I will also say, I think a lot of Danes at least, but I would hope that this goes for the whole Union, are now also experiencing a lot of solidarity with the countries that are bordering up to Russia, that are afraid for their own security. My colleagues from the Baltic countries are extremely concerned, of course, with good reason. Are they the next target for Putin? Well, we certainly don't hope so, but we are ready to defend our friends if it happens. And we need to continuously make our union stronger, military, but also on the portfolio that I'm responsible for, which is energy, because there is no security without energy security. And this is also why, getting back to your initial questions, you asked me, were I afraid that we would backtrack on our transition? I'm not really. I do acknowledge we have discussions, there are disagreements, but bottom line, I don't see any European leaders not arguing for more independence, not arguing for more ability to defend ourselves. And energy is at the core of this, and you cannot do it without becoming independent of imports of fossils and instead using homegrown clean energy from Europe.
Commissioner, very interesting stuff. Before we go, I have one extremely important question for you. On the podcast yesterday, we were talking about the Eurovision of trees. Tree of the Year is getting crowned today.
Tree of the Year?
Tree of the Year, the European Tree of the Year. And we were talking about our favorite trees. Now, I'm partial to a birch.
Birch?
As a Ukrainian, a birch. I like the birch juice. I like the white, beautiful birches. What's your favorite tree?
So after 25 years in politics, I get a question I have never gotten before. Do you know what? This is not very imaginatory, but now that you say birch, I can feel it in my stomach and my heart that I'm also a birch man.
Oh, well, we're going to end it at that. Thank you very much, Commissioner.
Thank you.
I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Folks, thank you. Please do remain seated. We've got our energy reporter, Ben Munster, who's going to continue a conversation with panelists for you soon. But thank you to the Commissioner for participating in this experiment. I'm really glad you're a birch man.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.